All right, looks like everybody's here now. So let us begin. Fine. So last weekend we discussed some of the basics of world history, and we will continue with that. We will conclude that today, of course. I promise you, there is no other session. Okay, Ghabru Naka. The stuff that we covered last time, we were looking at it from an angle of how is it that these Western countries managed to rule over the rest of the world, right? How is it that in the middle of the 15th century, until the middle of the 15th century or thereabouts, they were actually more backward than the Eastern empires, China and, well, let's say Vijayanagar and all of these Indian empires. There was no Mughal empire at that time in the middle of the 15th century. But anyway, okay, so how is it that these backward countries succeeded to propel themselves ahead of the rest of us? And what did they do once they had succeeded in developing? And we have looked at the Renaissance and the Reformation and the Enlightenment, right? Now, I had asked you to read the Declaration of Independence of the United States. Yes? Have you managed to find a copy of that somewhere? You've heard of the internet? You have heard of the internet. Okay. So it's possible that you might find a copy of that over there. It would be useful, okay? It would be useful to read what you have been recommended to read. You won't have that kind of time next year, okay? All of you have been through 11th and 12th standard. Yeah? Jitka 11वीत दंगा कराल, तितका 12वीत जास्ती त्रास होईल. It's as simple as that, okay? The more you sweat in peace, the less you will bleed in war. Okay? So try to use your time properly. I think I had already given plenty of fundas about that. Time is money वगैरह nonsense आहे. Because money that you spend, you will earn it again someday. Time that you have lost, not coming back. I assure you. Okay? It doesn't come back. Fine. So use your time properly, and let's hope after today's session you will feel like reading a little bit more. Especially if you are considering history as your optional subject. And I'm told 2 of you are already doing history optional batch. Are they here? Oh, 3 of you. Okay, 4 of you. Wonderful. 5 of you, 6 of you. Okay. Now you are starting to crawl out of the woodwork. एकाचा हात वर झाल्यावरती, you know, okay, सर काही खात नाहीत अजून तरी. Yeah? म्हणून मी आधी विचारून घेतलं, तुम्ही उपाशी आहात तर तुम्हाला खाऊन काय उपयोग नाहीये. Okay? Fine. Point is, especially if you have chosen history as an optional, you should know this stuff inside out. And I think my approach was also inside out, right? We started from 1989 and went backwards. Then we started from 1450 or thereabouts and went forwards. And to use that rather ridiculous analogy from last time, let's come to the patty or the tikki or whatever you want to call it, okay? This is the period which decided the fate of mankind, really, for the foreseeable future. Everything that you are seeing today, all the problems that my generation has left behind for you, all of those problems begin in this period. All of the growth, all of the development, all of this technology and everything that you have used, this is nothing, of course, you have used much more sophisticated technology. But all of that begins in this period, which coincides approximately with the Enlightenment and everything that came afterwards. Now, one of the drivers for the Enlightenment, and I think you will remember that the Enlightenment philosophers themselves used to call their movement as just a way of getting rid of the chains that bind us. And those chains bind us because we have allowed them to bind ourselves by those chains. It is we who have decided that we are inferior to somebody, that we cannot face our life unless there is some god and priest and government and whatever to support us, to help us, to see us through. And the more you think about it, the more you realize that yes, you are very much capable of living your life, understanding the world around you. And one of the motivations for the Enlightenment philosophers was the very famous scientists who had lived just a few years before them. We have heard of those scientists. Galileo, for example, yes? Everybody remembers the name Galileo? Galileo, if you want to call him that. Galileo Galilei. He was an Italian, as in his language was Italian. There was no nation called Italy at that time. He was one of the first who managed to scientifically prove that the planets revolve around the sun and not the other way around. Just because the dude shows up in the east early in the morning and leaves in the west at night doesn't mean that he is doing the traveling. Yeah, it is we who are doing the rotating around him. He did that using a very basic telescope, and you can conduct this experiment yourself. The cheapest possible telescope that you can find on the market, even that you can use to conduct the same experiment that Galileo did. He pointed it to Jupiter. Yeah? Everybody is aware of Jupiter. You pray to him every day. Yeah? Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu. Nine? Okay, fine. Never mind. All right. So he obviously observed that Jupiter has many moons, not just the one like we have, not just the two like Mars has. Jupiter has dozens of moons. Even through his primitive telescope, he could spot 5 or 6 of them. And as he observed this planet over a period of several months, he saw that the same moon was taking the same place at a periodic interval, which meant that those moons were rotating around Jupiter. And he concluded that therefore Jupiter is also rotating around something, okay, because of something that had already been proven. Galileo was not the first one to say that we have a heliocentric view of the universe. Helios manje Surya, sun. Heliocentric, the sun is at the center and not the earth is at the center. Okay, all of us have this ego, I am at the center of the universe. Nahi. Okay, all of us are always rotating, revolving something or the other. There is one parent star which binds us through its gravitational pull. All of us have experienced gravity and Newton's universal law of gravitation. Please note the term universal law of gravitation. This law is applicable anywhere in the universe. And what is the law? Every body attracts every other body with a force. You don't have to write it down, you'll find it anywhere. Every body attracts every other body with a force, and the magnitude of that force is proportional to the mass of each body and distance, square of the distance, inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. Every body is attracted to every other body, especially if they are teenagers' bodies. Okay? So, everybody is going to attract every other body with a force known as gravity, and this is true throughout the universe. Now for us in this day and age, 21st century, yeah, all of these things don't seem a big deal. But to people from the 15th, 16th centuries, something which is true throughout the universe was genuinely astonishing. They were stunned that we have this ability, we have this kind of brain power to figure out laws that are applicable on planets and whatever that we have not even heard of. Okay? So if there is some such law which is true throughout the universe, there can be other such laws which are true throughout the universe. We just need to go and find them. Yete lakshat? Inspired by the work of Newton, inspired by the work of Galileo, these philosophers, okay, inspired by the work of scientists, began to realize that the laws that govern us, even though perhaps have already been decided, we just need to discover those laws. The laws that govern us, the laws of polity, okay, the laws of administration, the laws of government, we can figure those out. And that is how they gradually arrived at a system which we follow today, which is democracy. Okay? We discussed the social contract or whatever last time, right? That back in the past, we chose the strongest among us as our chief, right? And we gave certain rights, gave up certain rights so that he can protect us from other such people like us, okay? But we did not give him the right to choose his successor or her successor, right? That right, that person took it, grabbed it from us, and now it is time for us to reclaim that right. And we do that now, right? We decide every 5 years who is going to rule us. By rule us, we mean who is going to follow the laws that we have in order to protect us from, well, whoever it is, Pakistan, ISIS, whoever is your current favorite, okay? Yeah. Okay? So, just try to understand the chronology of this happening. It is, of course, easier to figure out the laws of nature, jala apan physics manto. Yeah? I know you must have used the word Bhautik Shastra for physics, yeah, but the actual word for physics is Vastav Shastra, okay? Science of reality. Then they went to quantum mechanics and then it is no longer reality, okay? But originally, that is what physics was. Classical physics is trying to figure out what is happening around us. And just by following those laws, we got inspired to figure out all of these other laws. And as I pointed out that day, that the Americans were the first one to actually implement all of this theory into that constitution that they have written, that constitution which is still in force. It is a big deal for any system of government to last more than 2 centuries. Okay, 1776 is when they signed that Declaration of Independence. After that, they started fighting for independence. Okay, it's the American way. Adi announce करायचं, मग बघू काय करायचं ते. Okay, and eventually they gained their independence. But there were certain other reasons behind this. These American people, they were not colonized the way we were. Okay. Now, I think I spoke about it the other day, that there are, you might say there are 2 ways of colonizing. One is that you actually go and stay over there. The other is you just go and rule whoever is already staying over there. Okay. You know that the second case was what happened with us, because we were simply too many. Nobody could eliminate us and start living in our place. So they just came and ruled over us. In North America, on the other hand, the native population was minuscule and it was backward. There are geographical reasons for that, and we don't have that kind of time, but we could discuss that. We will discuss it next year if you are in the UPSC gang. So, yes, to begin with, the population in North America was minuscule. And secondly, when these Europeans started arriving, they brought their own diseases with them, to which the Native Americans had not developed any immunity. Alright, samajhte hai? You with me? Apart from all the scientific development and weapons technology, etc., that these people had, advanced weapons at that time included those muzzle guns, you know, you have to pour the gunpowder and then do this kind of thing with a piston and then aim and then fire, okay? Meanwhile, he is doing the same thing to you, so there's plenty of scope, okay? It's, yeah. So, that was advanced technology at that time. But it was not this advanced technology necessarily which won them that continent. It was also the fact that the local people had not developed any immunity to the diseases that Europeans carried with them. Diseases like smallpox, syphilis, there are so many other diseases which today, thankfully, many of you will not have even heard of, because we have managed to get rid of those. And yes, of course, they had the superior knowledge and they completely overpowered the native people in North America. But who were they? When I say these Europeans, do I mean Europe was a monolithic continent the way it is trying to be now with the European Union? No. All of them were trying to grab as much land as possible. प्रत्येक जण आपापली इस्टेट बनवायचा प्रयत्न करत होता. Okay? The first ones to try all of this were the Portuguese. And along with them, their next door neighbors, their brothers even, the Spaniards. Okay? Spain and Portugal were the first ones to venture into the oceans, the first ones from Europe. The Chinese had traveled a lot as well. The Indians as well. You are aware that much of Southeast Asia has our cultural influence, right? But amongst the Europeans, the Spaniards and the Portuguese were the first one. Now, because these Catholic brothers were fighting between each other as to who should own North America and who should own the New World, who should own the Old World, etc., their dad, as in Pope, decided to draw a line, literally a latitude. everything to the west of that latitude belongs to Spain. Okay? It belonged to somebody else, of course. Tumhi घेऊन टाका. This is for Spain. This is for Portugal. Which is why when you look at the American continents, North and South America, apart from Brazil, because that is where the latitude, the longitude approximately passed, all of North America to begin with was a Spanish territory. And to this day, many of those countries continue to speak Spanish. And everything to the east of that, सगळ्यांना east and west लक्षात येतंय, when I speak, if I am the map, yeah, everything to this side of my heart belongs to Spain, everything to that side belongs to Portugal, which is why the Portuguese arrived in India. Okay? India and some parts of Africa. That was their territory. And this was Spain's territory. मग आता या दोघां भावांचं भांडण मिटलं वगैरे सगळं ठीक आहे. व्हॉट अबाउट दी अदर युरोपियन्स? ते म्हणले पोप असतील तर घरचा वगैरे. या हु आर यू टू डिसाइड हे कोणाचं आहे? अंडरस्टँड, इट इज नॉट द लोकल पीपल हु आर सेइंग हु आर यू टू डिसाइड. इट इज थर्ड अँड फोर्थ पीपल हु आर सेइंग हे फर्स्ट आणि सेकंड कोण आले, आम्ही पण शोधणार, आम्ही पण करणार. ओके. And that is how the French and the British also started exploring. The Dutch also started exploring. Dutch as in people of Netherlands. They ended up colonizing Indonesia. And France and Britain eventually fought over North America. Okay. We are already now in the middle of the 18th century. Okay. And a lengthy war was fought between France and Britain, who were traditional enemies. France and Britain have always been enemies. Right up to the First World War, they were always at each other's throats. And then they suddenly became allies, and since then they have been allies. This war between France and Britain, some historians like to call it the original First World War because it was fought throughout the world. It was fought in Europe, in the places in France and Britain. It was fought in North America, between France and Britain as to who owns this, and it was fought in India as well. This war, known as the 7 Years' War, later on, of course, they didn't set out to do, chala 7 varsha yuddha karuvayat. Of course not. It was just a war at that time. Now we call it the 7 Years' War. It lasted from 1756 to 1763. Anything familiar about the date? What happened in 1757? June 23rd, Battle of Plassey. Very good. I did not actually expect June 23rd to be a hint, actually, right? But 1757 sadharan mahiti asतं लोकांना. Yeah. The Battle of Plassey, you might say, is one of the conflicts of this 7-year war. The French supported the Nawab, the British supported his opponent, and they fought amongst each other. Such conflicts happen throughout the world across these 3 continents, Europe, Asia, and North America. And it was a decisive victory for the British. From then onwards, the British managed to control India as well as control North America. Some French people continued to remain and continue to remain in a province known as Quebec, Quebec. Canada, therefore, has 2 official national languages, English and French. There are certain parts in Canada on the west coast where every road sign is written in 3 languages, English, French, and Punjabi, because there are so many Punjabi-speaking people over there now. Anyway, okay. You have heard of the Gadar movement and all of those things. Yeah, you know that there is a long link history between India and Indian people and Canada. Anyway, so this is where the French were elbowed out of North America. And Canada and the east coast of the North American continent, all of that fell into the hands of the British. Unlike British India, which was one single entity, the British in North America were divided in 13 different colonies. Okay? These 13 colonies later on became the first 13 states of the United States of America, which is why their flag denotes 50 stars, the current number of states, and 13 red and white stripes. You remember the flag of the United States. It is one of the most well-known symbols today, right? On the top left, there is that blue field on which there are white stars, 50 of them, and the rest of the flag is white and red stripes, 13 in number, to depict those 13 original states, which before becoming states of an independent nation were 13 different colonies. You can trace them today as well, north to south, on the Atlantic coastline of the United States. The people in these colonies were descendants of immigrants from Europe. Okay? Most of them had come from Britain for various reasons. Most of the reasons were religious, and some of the reasons were purely practical. There's plenty of land over there. There's too many people over here. Let's go to America. Let's go to America, therefore, became the slogan for the next 200, 300 years, because there is so much available over there. Okay? Now that we have Donald Trump in charge, then things are going the other direction. Nobody is going to America. People are trying to escape from America now. His slogan was "Make America Great Again," right? It ended up becoming "Make America Migrate Again." Okay, so but to begin with, back in those days, right from the early period of colonization, from the 17th century onwards, people from Europe, especially from Britain, started migrating to America. And some of these states continue to have a cultural link with their original forefathers from Europe. States like Massachusetts, where you have the city of Boston. People there are mostly Catholic. Okay, they are descended from Catholics who escaped from Britain, because Britain at that time had become Protestant, and they thought that they would be persecuted over there. And I think I mentioned to you the other day that Hindu Muslim, Jewish Muslim, none of these riots are remotely comparable to the kind of blood that has been spilled over Catholic and Protestant. Okay? Actual wars have been fought, wars that lasted 30 years. Fine. Apart from the British, quite a few German-speaking people have also migrated. Donald Trump is one of those, descended from German immigrants. His original surname was Drumpf, D-R-U-M-P-F. Okay? Yeah, if somebody is named Drumpf, it's very unlikely that you're going to vote for him, isn't it? So eventually they changed their family name to Trump. Quite a few people have migrated from Netherlands. They are mostly resident in the state of Pennsylvania, where you have the cities of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, etc. Okay? So anyway, many Europeans migrated to America and made their lives over there. So these colonies were not populated by local people who were being persecuted, or whose land was being stolen, or whose handicrafts were being eliminated. None of those things happened over there the way they had happened over here. त्या गोष्टी केव्हाच होऊन गेलेल्या होत्या. Okay? Even before colonization happened, locals had already been made uninfluential, okay, pointless. So the colonies were actually populated by European people who had an affinity towards the ruling government, unlike us. For us, it was a foreign government ruling over us. For them, it was their government, because they were as foreign as that government. Okay. Therefore, they were also exposed to the same principles of modernization, of the Renaissance, of the Reformation, and especially of the Enlightenment. So when Britain tried to tax these people, Britain had spent a lot of money in that 7 Years' War, and they had to recover that money somehow. And taxing the people is the simplest, most obvious way of doing that. So when the British tried to tax these people, they decided that that cannot be allowed. Okay? Britain had a parliament. Britain has had a representative body since the year 1215, over 800 years now. Okay? So Britain has always governed itself by the principle of the rule of law. Nobody is above the law. That is what the term rule of law means. Okay? You must have heard a lot of discussion about Article 14 is because of the Citizenship Act, etc. The rule of law is very much encompassed in that article of our constitution as well, right? Equality before the law and equal protection of the laws. Everybody is governed by the law. Nobody is above the law. And who is it that makes the laws? It is Parliament which makes the law. Do these colonies have a representation in Parliament? They do not. So how can Parliament make laws for them? Was the argument those people made. Okay? Try to imagine, we had not even heard of Parliament or asla kaitri nonsense, isn't it? None of those things were known to us. To these European immigrants, on the other hand, they had experienced all of that in Britain, and now they wanted the same thing. You can tax us, fine, provided our people also have seats in that parliament. If we have representatives from North America in the British Parliament, and then if the Parliament decides that there should be new taxes on our people, fine, we will pay those taxes. But if there is no representation, there can be no taxation. That became the slogan of their independence struggle. No taxation without representation. And eventually, this tiny bunch of farmers basically, okay, they had vast estates, but effectively that is what they were. They were farmers. These farmers managed to defeat the British Empire and gain independence. It's a very interesting story, but let's not go into too many details right now. You are, of course, welcome to investigate. Now, it's not obviously easy for a bunch of farmers to defeat the mighty British Empire. They had a lot of help. Most of the help came from Britain's good old enemy, France. Okay? The French were looking for revenge against the British for the war that they had lost, the 7 Years' War. And they helped the Americans gain independence from the British. As a token of that, you can see the Statue of Liberty in New York. Right? This was a gift by the French to the Americans. There is a Statue of Liberty in Paris as well. Nobody visits it. You also are not advised to visit it. It is in a park that is frequented by substance abusers. Okay? I dragged my long-suffering wife over there, and we had quite a few experiences. Okay? In that park near that replica Statue of Liberty. Basically, people go there because they are buying something or selling something. That is the only thing. Okay? And since we were doing neither, we had a lot of fun. Okay, things to remember when it is your turn to visit these cities and these places. Yeah, go to the New York Statue of Liberty, not the Paris one. Plenty of other stuff to do in Paris anyway. So the French managed to extract some sort of revenge over the British. The British lost their original territory. The commander-in-chief of their army in North America, the one who surrendered, was then made the Governor-General of India. His name is Cornwallis. Okay? It is a good depiction of the change of focus for Britain. Because they had lost North America, they decided to focus on India instead. Okay? And of course, the rest is the history that you study in modern Indian history. We are sticking to North America. Now, these French soldiers who fought in America saw how inspiring that Declaration of Independence, which you refused to read, was. Okay? That Declaration of Independence and those Enlightenment ideas originally came from France. Right? We have looked at this, right? That the Renaissance began in Italy, the Reformation in Germany, and the Enlightenment in France. Scholars such as Montesquieu and Rousseau and Voltaire, all of these people were the original philosophers of this movement known as the Enlightenment. Now, these French people saw those Enlightenment ideas in practice in America, and when they returned home after winning that fight, saw that their country was actually now backward compared to these Americans. Okay? Politically backward. Baki goshtinमध्ये backward असो doesn't matter. But if you have fought a war on ideas, have won a war on ideas, and then you return home to find that your country, the originator of those ideas, is actually not implementing them. Okay? This gave an impetus to what became one of the most well-known events of world history, that is the French Revolution. It kicked off in 1789, and the origins of the French Revolution are actually extremely complicated, unfortunately. Most struggles, most wars, most revolutions, most of the stuff happens for economic reasons. If your people are well fed, they will not care about anything else. If they have money, if they have affluence, if they have a consumer culture, and if they can buy a new TV every year, then they are happy. Not a new TV, you people buy new mobile phones every year. Zekai. Okay? If, on the other hand, they have to face a daily struggle for just food, that is when the trouble begins. And that is what happened with France. The French society, the French economy, was not at all efficiently organized. All the wealth was concentrated with a very, very, very tiny minority of people, known as the noblemen or the aristocracy. Okay? These were the people who owned all the lands. These were the people who had all the wealth. And these were the people who were exempt from paying taxes. Doesn't make logical sense, does it? The ones who have all the money, the ones who have all the land, are not required to pay taxes. Okay? The second group of people was the church, members of the church, priests, bishops, etc. They were also, of course, exempt from paying taxes. The church and its monasteries, etc., all of them owned a lot of property as well. And not only did they not have to pay a tax, but they imposed a special tax on the people, known as the tithe. T-I-T-H-E. Despite the spelling, the pronunciation is tithe. Right?
If you want to write it in Devanagari, this is how I would write it. Okay, this is how it is pronounced.
It literally means 1/10. Each of us have to pay 1/10 of our income to the church. This is the opposite of progressive taxation. I hope you understand progressive taxation. The more you earn, the more tax you have to pay. Makes sense, right? Asking a person who has only a limited source of income, for him to pay 30% of his income to the government is unfair. Okay? So we have these tax slabs, right? Some of you may have already started working. Definitely all of you will start earning soon enough, and you will then understand these things better. That your first 2.5 lakh rupees are exempt from taxation. Then 2.5 lakh to 5 lakh you have to pay 5% tax, 5 lakh to 10 lakh, 10% tax, etc. So, okay. That is called progressive taxation. The more you earn, the higher will be your tax rate. You have progressive electricity billing as well, right? For your first 50 units, the first 50 units that you consume, the rate of electricity is less. Beyond that, you have to not only pay more, you have to pay at a higher rate as well. The tithe is not at all progressive. Everybody has to pay 10% of whatever income they have. That income goes to the church. Okay? And the church will use it for making society better, build more factories. No, of course not. Okay? We have seen what the church used to do with its money. Yeah? That TV series that I'm guessing you have started watching, because Declaration of Independence nahi vaachnar tumhe. Yeah? It's okay, me but chidlo nahi hai. This is just, I like to throw a tantrum once in a while. Okay? So, all the money that was being earned by the people who did not have all of these privileges, that bunch of people was the third estate. The first estate was the church. The second estate was the aristocracy. And the third estate is everybody else. All of us. Okay? Doctors, engineers, lawyers, shopkeepers, farmers, absolutely everybody was the third estate. There was no middle class as such. Okay? Everybody belonged to the third set of people. And they were the ones who were paying all the taxes. They were the ones who had to earn all their money instead of just enjoy life in the typical French fashion. Once the French king started running out of money, which was bound to happen if he's going to fight wars all over the place, okay? First, they fought the 7 Years' War, which they lost. So obviously, despite investing so much money, they got nothing in return. Next, they fought this American War of Independence, which they did not lose, but they gained nothing from it. Right? It was the Americans who gained independence. The French gained Statue of Liberty, goodwill, वगैरे असल्या सगळ्या intangible गोष्टी. Okay. So further problems for the French treasury. So he decided to impose a tax on the aristocracy. And the aristocracy rebelled. They said that you can't do this unless you have a meeting of the three estates, and then the three estates decided that we should end all of these estates and all this nonsense. All of us should form one single body known as the National Convention, just like the British have a parliament. We will have that as well. And once they sat and once they started writing their constitution, they realized that we don't need this king person, we don't need this church vagare. All of those enlightenment ideas that had emanated from their country suddenly started taking force. Meanwhile, the common people on the streets, especially the streets of Paris, had also had enough. They literally had no food to eat. And they used to have protest marches, walking towards the royal palace, shouting, "We want bread, we want bread." And there's an apocryphal story, Dantakatha, about the Queen of France, Marie Antoinette, who was so disconnected with her own people. She asked her advisors, what are they shouting? They are shouting, "We want bread." Why? Because they don't have bread. If they don't have bread, they can eat cake. I do that every day. Okay? She had no idea, bread, cake, or cake तर पाहिलाही नसेल कोणी नॉर्मल लोकांनी. ओके, त्यांना नुसतं नॉर्मल पोळी भाजी खायला जमत नव्हतं, पैसे नव्हते. When your people are going hungry, you are totally dependent on whatever food that you can generate so that you can at least distribute it amongst the people. This is where the French royalty was unfortunately doomed because of what is today believed to be an El Nino effect. France had a terrible winter that year. The winter of 1788-89 was extremely harsh. All the rivers in France were frozen. If your rivers are frozen and you are living in the 18th century, you can't run your mills. Mills, girnya, used to run on water power. If the water is frozen, no mills, which means the supply of flour, peat that you had started to reduce. Instead of harvesting and grinding all of those freshly harvested crops into flour, you just couldn't because your mills had broken down because of the harsh winter. So the prices of food rose further. Then, of course, as if that was not enough, when the winter ended and the rivers started melting, France faced very severe rain showers. Because of that, these frozen rivers now became flooded rivers and they washed away all the new crops that had been planted. So further increase in the price of food grain. And so more and more percentage of the common people's income was used up simply in purchasing food. Okay? Try to imagine your situation 2 or 3 weeks ago when onion was at whatever, 200 rupees kilo or what. Yeah? So significant chunk of your money goes in just buying food. What will you do for the rest of your needs, whatever your other necessities are? You have no food left over for that. If you have no food left over for buying new clothes, etc., the people who make clothes, they start running into losses, right? They are dependent on you buying their product. You don't have money to buy their product, okay? And this kind of an economic vicious cycle begins, and that is exactly what happened in France at this period of time. The people simply revolted and overthrew the king. It is a bit complicated than that, but that is the gist of it. To take the place of this, before a new government could be formed, there was many attempts at forming a directorship of 5 people who would rule the entire country, etc., etc. Then it became a directorship of 3 people. Then it became the rule of just one person because he was that talented, because he was that ambitious, because he was that ruthless. His name is Napoleon Bonaparte. We have all heard of this name at least, although we might not have heard his entire story. And again, you will have to wait for next year for the full details. Right now, just the trailer, and it is a very old story. Every time there is turmoil, every time there is rioting or whatever amongst the people, and every time there is some sort of a revolution, it is stabilized only by military power. That has been the experience that we gain from history. Okay, it is always some military general who comes and smooths things over by simply using force. One of the first ones to do that was a gentleman I mentioned last week, Julius Caesar, right, who got rid of the Roman Republic and established the Roman Empire. We are, of course, living next door to a country which has such kind of military stuff every once in a while, right? 4-5 वर्षात एकदा केलं नाही त्यांना की त्यांना अस्वस्थ वाटायला लागतं. Okay, and then a few years down the line they sentence him to death वगैरे. It doesn't matter, right? He's living nicely in, where is he staying these days? Musharraf? Dubai. Yeah. Okay, fine. I don't know, wherever it is. Point is, he's definitely not in Pakistan and facing whatever, the death sentence or whatever it is. Did you read that news, by the way? Yeah. In a shocking way, one of the judges said that he directed the Pakistani police, etc., to capture Parvez Musharraf dead or alive. And if you find him dead, drag his corpse to the main square in Islamabad, and we will hang his corpse as well. Reformation, Renaissance, okay? These are quite clearly still medieval people. They have courts and everything, but even the judges have this kind of mindset. Okay? All right. So, returning back to the point, Napoleon Bonaparte, a brilliant general, no doubt about it. He was especially good at maths, and that is why he chose the artillery. You understand artillery? Tofa. Yeah? Tofa means cannons, not Hindi wala tofa. Okay? So howitzers and whatever that we use these days. Okay? Bofors. Why? If you're good at maths, you can, using projectile motion and all of those things, you can calculate exactly kuthe. Nahi to tumchyat sainyavarti maral vagere. So the better you are at mathematics, the better you are as an artillery officer. And he rose very quickly through the ranks. Many of the French generals, all of the French officers used to be aristocrats. And it was the aristocrats who were thrown out by the revolution. So there was plenty of scope for promotion. And he was, of course, undoubtedly a very exceptional military tactician. There are many policies of his for building his military which are followed to this day by all modern militaries of the world. You might have heard of the word division. In an army, have you heard of this word? A division. This was one of Napoleon's many innovations, that every division in an army is organized like an entire separate army on its own. So it has, that division has to look after its own supplies. Okay, the division's responsibility is to feed its soldiers. It is not the entire army's responsibility to feed the entire army, etc., etc. Okay, just one of the many innovations, and he was absolutely brilliant. The rest of Europe was meanwhile terrified by this revolution. What if all other people realized that आपल्या राजांचा काही उपयोग नाही, is what the kings began to worry, right? They were all telling each other that we have this God-given right, the divine right of kingship. Okay, we had that concept as well, right? Zill-e-ilahi. What does Zill-e-ilahi mean? Shadow of God on earth. That is what the king or emperor is supposed to be. Okay, but in reality, is that the case? Yeah. Shadow of God जाऊ God पाहिलंय का कोणी? We don't know. तुम्ही कोणी सांगितलं की तुम्ही व्हायला पाहिजेत king वगैरे, right? Once all of us begin to realize that this is the case, that those rulers are not really anything special, okay? That they are simply a bunch of selfish people who just happen to be born in the right family, yeah? Then, if all the European people began to think in this manner, the revolution would spread everywhere, and all of the European royal families would be destroyed. And of course, you understand how royal families work. They all intermarry amongst each other, right? Right? If you are a king and if you have a daughter, you would want her to marry some other prince, isn't it? That is how it obviously worked. This Marie Antoinette that I was speaking of, she was the princess of Austria, and she was married to the king of France. So, it's like a contagion. It is like a disease which will quickly spread, and our entire clan of royal families will be destroyed if this revolution is allowed to spread. This is what the other European monarchs feared, and so they tried to defeat France in the field of battle to curb that revolution, to stop it in its track. But they were faced with this brilliant general named Napoleon, and Napoleon managed to defeat all of them over and over again, over and over again. France had one major strength. It was the most populous nation in Europe. Okay? The largest single nation in Europe at that time was France. Today, the largest single nation by population is Germany. Okay? And as soon as Germany was unified into one nation, we know what happened next. First World War, Second World War. Okay? Before that, France was the largest nation. It had a lot of people to simply throw into battle. And this is where a brave general like Napoleon is also handy. The other French officers used to fight from the backseat driving. Okay? Napoleon was not like that. He realized that I don't have too many trained troops. I have plenty of people. I don't have time to train them. So I can lead them only by example. He used to be at the vanguard, at the front of every action, not sitting in the back, okay, and durbin घेऊन वगैरे नहीं. He used to be at the front, leading them, leading his troops, and that is one of the reasons that he managed to prevail over all of these European powers. We of course know that gradually he was defeated. Okay. He tried to invade Russia as well. He had already captured just about all of Europe. There's a very famous book you can read called War and Peace. This is by a Russian writer named Leo Tolstoy. Very good. War and Peace. Easy to understand what the book is about. But don't read this book right now. It is a huge book, and it takes a lot of effort to read it. This is the book you should be reading once you are selected in the service of your choice. Right? तुमचा तो टीव्हीवर इंटरव्ह्यू वगैरे असतो तेव्हा सांगायचं सध्या काय करताय सध्या वॉर अँड पीस वाचतो. Okay? That is how it should be. Not right now. Okay? It's not a book to read at this point of time. But the book begins with a very famous line. There are very famous lines that start a lot of books, and this is one such sentence. It goes that all of France had become a part of the Bonaparte estate. Okay? One of his brothers, he had crowned as the king of Spain. His brother-in-law was the king of Portugal. Another brother was the king of Italy. He had conquered all of these territories and installed his family members at their heads. And he, of course, became the emperor of France. The only nation that remained undefeated was Britain. Okay? And the analogy given about this is, how does a lion defeat a shark? Okay? France being the lion and Britain being the shark. You simply can't get meat in the same field of battle. That is how Britain had escaped. So Napoleon tried a different tactic. He decided to blockade Britain. Britain is, of course, an island. Everybody is very much aware of that. And Britain is a very densely populated island. Britain is not an island which has a lot of fertile soil. Okay? If you want, Britain is very similar to Japan. Okay? It's a large continent, and it is just off that continent. It's a large populated, fertile continent, but Japan does not have that kind of fertile soil. It is therefore dependent on trade with the next nearby continent. And this continent was entirely controlled by Napoleon. So he decided to blockade Britain. If Britain gets no supplies from the continent, it will gradually begin to starve and surrender. Okay? Now try and realize that Britain, being an affluent nation, was an important customer for all of these European nations. They were dependent on British money. Now this gentleman has come and said that we cannot sell our goods to Britain. And the ones who were especially dependent on British customers were the Russians. Russia is a major producer of wheat, especially the parts of Russia that no longer belong to it. Countries like Ukraine have vast wheat fields. And they were stopped from selling their produce to the British. and they needed that money, the British money, to feed themselves. And so therefore they started breaking this blockade and started trading with Britain despite Napoleon's threats and warnings. So Napoleon invaded Russia in the year 1812. That invasion is what War and Peace is about. Okay, so you need to know all of these things before you can even read that book. Okay, and then you can start reading that 1,000-page book. Okay. Napoleon made the same mistake that a century before him, the king of Sweden had done. Sweden used to be a very powerful country back then. Sweden is pretty much right next door to Russia. And so when the Swedish tried to have an empire of their own, Russia was the obvious target. They invaded Russia and were defeated. Napoleon made the same mistake. 100 years later, Adolf Hitler made the same mistake. Okay. So rule number 1, when you start ruling your empire, do not invade Russia. Okay. That is a recipe for disaster. It is simply too large. Okay. You send your army in and you start defeating their troops, battle after battle, battle after battle, but you can't control all the territory that you have won. Okay. Just as we have a peninsula, south to north, it goes on expanding, right? From Kanyakumari northwards, every latitude covers more ground. Same is with Europe. It is a peninsula, right? The tapering end is Portugal and Spain, and the broad end is Russia. The more you enter Russia, the broader it gets. Okay, the tougher it is to hold. And even if you find enough people to hold all of this territory, you can never be enough prepared for the Russian winter. And that is exactly what happened to Napoleon's army. He reached Moscow, claimed that he had won it, and returned back. He had left France with an army of 500,000 people, 500,000 soldiers. That was the largest European army to ever be collected till then. He returned with 50,000. Okay, all of them had perished. To this day, mass graves of Napoleon's army soldiers are found. The latest ones of 7 or 8 years ago. Okay, French soldiers from the invasion of Russia. This weakened him terribly, and then he lost control of France. He was thrown out into exile in an island in the Mediterranean Sea, from where he escaped, okay, and returned to France. Again, gained control. Again, all of the European powers once again formed an alliance, and this time they defeated him decisively at that very famous Battle of Waterloo. Everybody has heard of that word at least. Yes, Waterloo is a village in Belgium. Not much to see there. You can just go and put it on your Facebook. Waterloo lage logo. There's nothing over there, nothing to see. Okay. You must have visited when you visit our battlefields, Haldi Ghati and all. Yeah, it's important for us, so we go there. But there's nothing actually. There's no memorial or anything of that sort. Okay. Anyway, so finally Napoleon was defeated, and all of these European powers came together for building a new European order. Okay, whatever the French had tried, revolution and all of these things, they had successfully stopped that from spreading outside France, and now they had captured France as well. They had restored the descendant of that last king who had been guillotined during the French Revolution, right? So that family was restored to the French throne, and everything seemed to be going fine. So for the next few years at least, there was not much warfare in Europe. I spoke the other day that Europe is the continent of Christianity, but in these times, as you have noticed by now, Europe is the continent of war. There are constant battles. All the time somebody is fighting against somebody else. It has its advantages. That is one of the other reasons, one of the side reasons why Europe has developed so much. If you have so many adversaries around you all the time, you try to find something that will help you beat them. It's like your UPSC competitive exam. There are so many people around you, you are always trying to be better than everybody else. Okay, that is approximately what happened to all of these European countries. But despite defeating Napoleon, one of the things that his conquests had unleashed, that was an idea that they could not defeat. This idea was the idea of nationalism. I mentioned that Napoleon conquered all of these European territories and installed his family members as their rulers. The people were therefore forced to accept whoever was ruling them. It was an outsider. And that is when this idea, this thing that they remembered was that they are a separate nation. They are not French. They are Italian. They are not French. They are Spanish. They are not French. They are Portuguese. Okay? This feeling of nationhood was rekindled in the minds of the people as a byproduct of Napoleon's conquests. Okay? Try to understand this. It is a slightly abstract thing to imagine, but it is, well, in a way, it is no different than how we came together as a nation because we were all ruled by the British. Okay? It is a common criticism of India, especially by leftist historians, that India as an idea did not exist until the British showed up. Okay? It's okay, fine, accept it, okay. It is an idea now, right? Now can you eliminate the idea of India? It's not possible. Okay? And it came together because the British were ruling us. Something like that happened in each of these European territories. All of them realized that they were something different from the rest of Europe when an outsider started ruling them. Okay? And this idea of nationalism gave rise to the next set of wars in European history in the second half of the 19th century, 1851 onwards. These were the wars for Italian unification and German unification. These two countries or these two nations were born in the second half of the 19th century. And the origin of that is the conquest of those territories by the French. So when the French returned home, they still left that idea alive of the idea of nationhood. I think we discussed the other day that the British and all the colonizers fought in India with that much fervor and vigor because the idea of nationhood had already developed in them. Okay? So when we look at history from our perspective of the 20th and 21st century, we start thinking that why didn't these Indian rulers come together and fight against the British? Right? Why were they not able to do that? The answer is actually quite straightforward. For them, it was just another ruler who was coming and trying to invade them. Okay? The British were no different to the Indian rulers as their next door neighbor. Right? आमच्याकडे प्रथा आहे दसऱ्याला सीमोल्लंघन केलंच पाहिजे. Right? I don't know प्रत्येक जण गोल गोल फिरायचे का मी ह्याच्यात तो त्याच्यात वगैरे. I don't know how it worked exactly. Okay? But if everybody is supposed to cross their border once a year, compulsorily, mandatorily, okay, the hope that they can come together to thwart an outsider, unfortunately, was not developed enough. Okay? So if you have this feeling of nationhood, this idea that you belong together, that your fate is tied together, your destinies are going to go in one particular direction, all for you together, that is when you start to behave like a nation, and that is the idea that came to the fore in the middle of the 19th century. A lot of bloody wars were fought in the 19th century for the unification of these countries. What was especially bloody about them, what caused more and more casualties, because by now another earth-shattering event had already taken place, which is the Industrial Revolution. Okay? And that is what I was talking of when I said that all the problems that we are facing today, along with all the good things that are happening today, everything has its roots in this event known as the Industrial Revolution. Now, let's remind ourselves, Italy मध्ये Renaissance, Germany मध्ये Reformation, France मध्ये Enlightenment. Industrial Revolution began in England. Okay? Yes, you can say Britain, but to be more specific, England. So obviously you have to ask the question, why? Why England? Why not anywhere else? Is it that the English people were more intelligent? No. Look at Brexit. Okay? Of course not. Okay? So what was it? Did they have more engineers? That is a possibility. Were they better at science? At that time, it seems that they were. Okay? And the originator, the driving force behind the Industrial Revolution was a simple machine known as the steam engine. The steam engine was invented
not by James Watt. It is a common misconception. The name of the inventor is Newcomen. Newcomen.
Britain had a lot of coal mines, okay, still does, but they don't mine it anymore because it's not environmentally the right idea. Plus, most of it is exhausted now. Okay, but there were a lot of coal mines in Britain. Britain has a very unique geography, and these coal mines, none of them were located more than 100 miles away from a means of water transport. Okay, first of all, it is an island. There is the sea available everywhere, just about. But even when you go in the interiors of Britain, away from the coastline, there are still a lot of navigable rivers. Okay? Yes, it is difficult for us to imagine navigable rivers. जेव्हा आमच्याकडे मुळा माठा नावाचा कॅनॉल आहे. Okay, so navigable river तो खूप लांबची गोष्ट आहे, isn't it? But yes, British rivers have always been navigable. We have annual rivers, not perennial rivers. पावसाळ्यात पाणी असतं, बरोबर? The Himalayan rivers are perennial, right? But not really. Okay, but Britain has much more rainfall than us, for example. Okay, there is always water in these British rivers. They have always been navigable. So even if you are away from the coastline, you can still use those rivers for transporting heavy goods, such as the coal that you have mined. So even if the coal mine is away from the coastline, you can still easily transport that coal. What's the big deal about the coastline? You can export it, right? And water transport to this day is the cheapest and safest mode of transporting bulky goods. You cannot, for example, transport all the coal that you have mined through aeroplanes. Please don't try that, okay? You will simply run out of all the fuel that is available in the world just for transporting this coal, okay? Or crude oil, right? You don't transport crude oil using aeroplanes. You have to do it using those ultra large crude carriers, ULCCs, and very large crude carriers, VLCCs. Okay, so these were some of the advantages that Britain had. Plenty of coal, and plenty of coal in locations from which it could be transported wherever it was required. Apart from this rainfall, etc., being a geographical advantage, it was a disadvantage as well. Everybody understands the concept of groundwater. The more it rains, the more groundwater there is going to be. If there is a lot of groundwater, when you start digging for coal, you are eventually going to hit water. And I'm sure you realize there should not be water in a coal mine, preferably, right? Not a good idea. Not a good idea to have that. That is where the steam engine came in. They wanted to invent something to use as a pump to remove the water from the coal mine shaft. Okay? That is why they invented this thing. Necessity, as usual, is the mother of invention. Grandmother of invention is laziness, okay? But mother of invention is necessity. I'm serious. If you have traveled to the developed world, and you will eventually anyway, definitely, I was struck by the things that I saw when I went there. They have an automatic sharpener. Yeah, pencil घालायची त्याच्यात sharpen करून येते. एवढा सुद्धा effort नाही करायचा. Okay? That's why I said laziness is the grandmother of invention. Okay? But necessity is definitely the mother of invention. And for the need of extracting the water out of the coal mine shaft, the steam engine was developed. One such steam engine came to the workshop of James Watt for repairs. Okay? James Watt's day job was to make instruments for the faculty of the science department at Glasgow University. Think of this post. This post existed in the 18th century. Okay? Already they had made so much progress scientifically, thanks to their predecessors like Newton, etc., that there were universities which hired people whose job was to help the faculty set up their experiments. And so he was very good at tinkering with these kind of gadgets. And like any other engineer, he was envious of this gentleman's invention. Okay? And he actually proved to be true to his word. He found that Newcomen's steam engine was extremely inefficient. If you are interested, okay, everybody knows what an engine is. You have vehicles of your own, right? It is the same concept. Instead of petrol or diesel, coal is used. You've seen the movie Sholay. Yeah, there's that famous train scene at the start. That is a steam engine. Okay, the steam locomotive is effectively a steam engine with wheels attached. Okay, so all the power that is generated is transferred through that camshaft to wheels, and then you can go places. But Newcomen's engine was extremely inefficient. You need to have the movement of a piston. You've heard of this? A piston goes front and back, back and forth, back and forth. For that, you need to have expand and contract, for which it has to be heated and cooled. Okay, those are the requirements. So for cooling, you have to have a separate cylinder. Newcomen's engine heated and cooled in the same body. So more and more fuel was required, which was an extremely inefficient way of doing things. Newcomen steam engine, madna teni cylinder bahar kadla, kept it as a separate condenser, and voila, 60% increase in efficiency. That is literally what happened. If you have now a more efficient steam engine, it meant that you could extract water from deeper in the coal mine shaft, which means you could reach coal that was even deeper into the ground, which means more and more coal became available, which means coal became cheaper, which means you could use coal for anything that you wanted to, not just for those government controlled tasks, which meant that you had more and more iron and steel available, okay? Because iron and steel mining from its ore and extraction, etc., requires a very high temperature. Those high temperatures require a fuel with a greater calorific value. Fuels like coal, okay? लाकडाने तुम्हाला iron and steel वगैरे बनवता येणार नाही. You will have to have a better fuel for that. Now suddenly more coal was available. So more iron and steel was being produced. So more and more iron and steel was available to these crazy inventors to tinker, to try more and more things. Okay? Because iron and steel is also cheap now. Okay? So if you have this cheap source just because of this work done by James Watt, suddenly everything is much more easily available. So more and more inventions started pouring in. More and more people became successful at inventing these things. Until one gentleman named Arkwright, I should write, of course, James Watt's name. This fellow came up with this system that is today known as the factory system of doing things, of manufacturing. Okay? So the efforts of these intelligent, hard-working people, driven people, is the reason why the world suddenly changed completely, thoroughly. Okay? What is the big deal actually? How fine, more coal is available, fine, more iron and steel is available, fine, more inventions are happening. How does it really affect you and me? Instead of doing all of the tasks manually, they were started to be done by machines for the first time. Efficient machines, predictable, dependable machines. Okay? Machines that did not break down very easily. Machines that required a power source which was readily available in that country at least. Okay? All of this meant that all the stuff that used to take a long time, for example, weaving your cloth, instead of that you could mass produce cloth through using your newly built cotton mills. Cotton was actually a very good candidate. If you have any experience in farming of cotton, you will know that there are so many steps between the cotton plant in the farmer's field to the cotton shirt that you are wearing. Okay? There are so many different steps. First of all, you have to plant the cotton. Even that can be done mechanically, right? Instead of just scattering the seeds as we used to do back in the Neolithic phase, instead of that, people had started using mechanized seed drills, which could plant in nice straight lines, etc., which made it easier to harvest. People started building harvesters as well, which instead of manually picking the cotton ball, the machine would do that for you. Once the cotton ball is picked, the next step is ginning. The word ginning literally comes from engine, okay, because that was the first thing that they tried doing with the machine. What is ginning? Removing the seeds from the cotton, right? Think of how strenuous and how time-consuming a task it is if you do it manually. You have to pick every cotton ball and remove all the seeds from it. Okay, that was done in a machine. In a different machine, all of this ginned cotton was then pressed into slabs. Then the yarn was taken out of it. Then that yarn was woven into cloth. Then that cloth was given to tailors for stitching into clothes. Every step could be mechanized. And that is why cotton became the driving force of the Industrial Revolution. There were many other inventions which indirectly affected the industrialization of the world. Let's not forget that all of this colonization and everything had started because these Europeans were looking for spices. Why were they looking for spices? Just because it was tasty? You don't do so much just because it is tasty. Yeah? Spices, yes.
Because it creates heat in your body. So as a European, it is very cold.
Okay, that is one reason. It does create heat in your body. Anything else? What is the reason why we add spices? If it, he rightly pointed out, it does create heat in our body. So why do we have the spiciest food in Andhra Pradesh, for example, and not Kashmir? There's another advantage of spices. हळदीचे फायदे निबंध लिहा. Yes, it stops bacterial growth. Okay, so it was a life and death matter for them getting hold of spices because they can't hunt all the time. They have very, very severe winters, as he pointed out. Okay, so they had to store their food longer, and meat especially goes bad very easily, very quickly. Okay, but if you use spices to cure that meat, to store that meat, not just salt, all of these other stuff as well, it lasts longer. But with industrialization and the invention of refrigeration, the spices were no longer required for that. But you already had colonies. So what do you do with them? Dump your goods over there. Use them exactly as they ended up using them. Use them for growing cotton and use them for selling the final product. Okay, that completely changed the way
we were being exploited. And yes, a byproduct was that our handloom and handicraft industry was completely destroyed. But try and remember that they had handloom and handicraft industries as well. Okay, Britain had a very famous wool industry. Okay, wool was the main export of Britain before the Industrial Revolution. And these handloom workers, they also protested and marched and committed acts of violence against the Industrial Revolution. Such people today as well who resist modernization, who resist industrialization, are referred to by the name of the leader of that movement. His name was Ludd. Tumhi fakt Ludd mana. And such people are known as Luddites. Okay, you may have heard this term being used to describe Elon Musk of all people. You heard of Elon Musk? Yeah, he's totally against artificial intelligence, etc. And his opponent is Mark Zuckerberg, who keeps on singing the praises of modernization, etc. So Zuckerberg's followers refer to Musk as a Luddite. Okay, Luddite, a person who resists change, who resists modernization. Okay? So don't think that we were the only ones who suffered because of this. Their very own people suffered as well. Point is, change is inevitable. You need to be on the right side of it. Okay, and you need to keep on learning and improving and changing and adopting the new methodologies. Otherwise, everything that we have suffered through for all of these centuries, we will have to suffer through it again. Those who forget their past are condemned to repeat it. Okay, so yes, one of the many reasons of studying history, analyzing the problems of the past, figuring out what to do when such similar problems emerge again. You have to acknowledge, grudgingly kyun na ho, you have to acknowledge how good these people were at exploiting whatever resources were available with them. Okay, the colonies, for example, all of these colonies that they had used for just procuring spices were now their markets for finished goods. Secondly, industrialization also moved in a direction that was totally different from what these people had thought of. Scientists never think that their inventions will be used to harm somebody, but eventually they are, right? The history of warfare, it has gone from thobadik marne to dagad marne to baan marne, talwar marne vagare to nuclear weapons, right? Whatever technology we develop, we manage to use it for warfare. And because the industrial revolution had already taken place, industrial warfare now started taking place every time war broke out, which is why these battles of Italian and German unification were especially bloody. The casualty numbers were so high. One of the battles that the Italians fought against the Austrians at a place called Solferino is famous because a Swiss banker witnessed that battle. In those days, you could do that. Chala ikde ladai hoti hai, zara bagun nivat kai challe vagare. Okay, it was genuinely possible because civilians were treated as civilians. Okay, if you were not a fighter, you could sit as a spectator and watch what is happening. Okay, the guns were not that good either. त्यांचे actual target ला गोळ्या लागायचं नाही, तुम्हाला तर लागण्याचे chances नाही. Okay, but because of the industrialization, so much blood was spilled, especially in that battle. Some 40,000 soldiers died in one day, which had never happened before in the history of mankind. That एका दिवसाच्या लढाईमध्ये इतके लोक मारले गेले. And it was witnessed by this banker from Switzerland named Dunant. I think it is J. Henri Dunant, D-U-N-A-N-T. He was so moved by the suffering of those soldiers that he created an organization to help people in situations, caught in situations like this. The organization is known as the International Red Cross, which became the first ever recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. Nobel Peace Prize is named after a gentleman named Alfred Nobel, whose main contribution to science is the invention of dynamite, hence the Nobel Peace Prize, right? To make up for, or to, as a paschatap, as a prayashchit for all the lives that he has taken, he donated his earnings to that committee, that Peace Prize and all the other prizes committee. This gentleman, तेव्हा Swiss bankers वेगळे असायचे evidently, he donated his proceedings to the International Red Cross. So after such bloody battles, the Austrians, who used to control much of the Italian territory, were defeated, and the new nation of Italy was born. Similarly, almost parallelly, slightly delayed, 5 or 10 years after Italy, Germany was reunited. Germany's main adversary, the one country which was opposing German unification, was France, because of the effect that I've already told you. France was the largest nation in Europe. If all the German-speaking people were united under one country, that would become the largest nation in Europe. And this nation is much more strategically located, right in the center of the continent, right? That location actually ended up becoming the worst thing for Germany geopolitically. It had enemies on both sides. Okay, so the other day I had compared this unifier of Germany, Bismarck, to Shivaji Maharaj, right? because of his diplomatic skills. That does not mean that he relied simply on diplomatic skills. He is, after all, known as the Iron Chancellor. This famous speech that he gave in the German parliament, the Prussian parliament. Prussia was one of these hundreds of German kingdoms.
Prussia, Russiaच्या आधी P. The German name for Prussia is, football fans, Borussia. Okay, there are famous football clubs
with that name. Okay, so Bismarck was the Chancellor of Prussia, and Prussia it was which took the initiative in unifying all of Germany into one country. The final battle of unification was what was fought against the French. It was the French who continued to oppose the unification of Germany. So ultimately they had to fight a war against the French. This war, it's not given much importance, but proved to be a crucial turning point in history. It is known as the Franco-Prussian War. Not much imagination is used. It was fought in 1870-71. And this was a massive defeat for the French. It was during this war that those disputed territories between Germany and France, you have heard of these names so many times,
Alsace and Lorraine.
These were captured by Germany from France. These two territories are disputed for various reasons. Now we have established that nationhood usually begins with a common language. And people staying in these two territories were as French as they were German. Okay? There is no geographical border between Germany and France. It is just like we have partitioned Punjab. Right? There is no river or mountain range or anything that you can easily demarcate as the borderline between these two nations. It is simply a plain in which this artificial border is drawn. And Alsace and Lorraine are in that region exactly. Have you heard of this dog named German Shepherd? It is also known as Alsatian. Okay? It's a good way to remember it. It is German as well as French. Okay? Fine. So this 1871 war resulted in the creation of the largest nation in Europe, the nation of Germany. There were certain problems in German nationhood. Northern half of Germany, just like northern half of Europe, was Protestant. This is where Martin Luther hailed from. This is where the princes and kings and aristocrats who supported Martin Luther came from. Southern part of Germany to this day remains Catholic. Cities like Munich are in the Catholic part of Germany. Okay? The others are in the Protestant part. Nonetheless, because they had struggled so much and fought so hard for their unification, there is a certain martial tradition amongst the Germans. Okay? Think of the Rajputs in our country, or even we people, right? So the Germans you can compare to that. It is also a very cold country, especially the eastern part of Germany, eastern Prussia, etc., that today falls in Poland, is an extremely cold territory. Life is not at all easy. The more hardships you face, the better, the stronger you become. And that was the case with the Germans. Once they had unified and once they had this huge economy and this massive army and all the other things that the Industrial Revolution had brought along with it, Germany decided to enter the same battle that all their older European neighbors had been fighting, the battle for colonization. Germany decided to acquire colonies across the world, wherever they could find. Okay? Now, most of the colonies were already taken, right? All of Asia was colonized either by Britain or France or even the Netherlands, which is such a tiny country, right? And then there were even those European nations which had fallen behind, Spain and Portugal, which were at the forefront of colonization, because they remained Catholic, because they remained strongly, almost fatalistically Catholic, they were not able to gain from the modernization of their continent. So France was an exception, but otherwise amongst the Catholic nations, Portugal and Spain, although they had these colonies elsewhere, had pretty much stopped progressing. What remained to be colonized was Africa. And this phase, later decade of the 19th century, the last decade of the 19th and the first decade of the 20th century, is described by a set of events which are together called the Scramble for Africa. You understand the word scramble? Think of a batsman who is worried about getting run out and how to tadfadat posto, yeah, scrambles to the crease. Okay, this was a scramble for Africa. The African coastline had been colonized by the Portuguese to begin with. Okay, and later on, France captured most of northern and central Africa. Then the Germans entered the picture. Even tiny Belgium had a vast colony. The nation known as Congo, which used to be called Zaire, right? That was a Belgian colony. If there are any fans of Tintin over here, you've read Tintin? Yeah? One of the very first Tintin books, a very controversial one, nobody likes to read it anymore. Tintin in the Congo depicts how terrible the colonization of Africa was by Belgium. Tintin, of course, is a Belgian character. Fine. So Africa was the one over which they started struggling against each other, scrambling for whatever territory they could hold. And eventually they managed to hold peace conferences in order to divide Africa amongst themselves. Okay? This is not very different from the Pope deciding ki ha part tumsa and to part tumsa. Okay? But instead of having just two people to divide the entire world between themselves, now we had all of these European nations who had to cut up this cake called Africa, which is why when you look at the borders on the African map, they are all straight lines. Okay? Whenever you see a straight line on a map, the immediate conclusion to be drawn is it is an artificial border. Okay? It is a border drawn by a bunch of bureaucrats sitting in an office. Okay? Ha part tumsa, ha part tumsa. Okay? That is exactly what had happened to Africa, which is why Africa continues to find it so difficult to progress. These people sitting in Europe had divided their land with no logic whatsoever. These were mostly nomadic tribes over there. They were spread across a vast territory. They never thought of territory as their own or land as their own. There's an old movie from about 1980 or thereabouts. The Gods Must Be Crazy. Have you seen this movie? Yeah, it's a fun movie to watch, but it brings out some of the problems by modernization and all of these things that have happened in Africa. The gods must be crazy. So yes, Africa continues to face problems. Nations or tribes which used to live across a territory were now divided into two. Two tribes which were at war were grouped into the same country, okay, into the same colony, because these Europeans sitting in freshly, newly discovered, newly invented air conditioning, they had no clue what is actually happening on the ground in Africa. Point is, don't forget where it all began. Okay, even this you can trace its roots to the Industrial Revolution and to all the things that came before it as well. All the problems that the world is facing today is what we have scrambled to cover today, right, in our time together. So once this struggle for new colonies began, once Germany also entered the race, it was up to the already colonizing powers to hold on to their territory. Okay? And this sparked off an arms race between these nations. Sometimes the arms race was sparked off by the laws that these countries had made. Britain, for example, was legally obliged. There was a law passed by the Parliament of Britain which stated that Britain's navy should be stronger than the next two strongest navies combined. Okay? How is the strength of a navy measured? Is there a unit for measurement?
It is tonnage, the weight of the ships that you have built. Okay, the total weight of the ships that you have built. Nice. So, for example, this is just an example. Okay, don't take these numbers too seriously. Let's say the next strongest navy was France, followed by Germany. Okay, now the UK's navy, just take some number, 100 is the tonnage. It's a ridiculously low number. Okay, 100 tons is nothing for the kind of size battleships are of. And France is 40 and Germany is 35. Okay,
so if this is the situation, then British law is satisfied. Whatever is mandated by the law made by Parliament, their navy is strong enough according to that. Britain was the strongest navy in the world for a long time, since the final decades of the 16th century onwards. Britain had always relied on its navy. We took that example as well, lion and shark. Okay, was always the strongest navy because it was an island dependent on trade for its very existence. So if you want to protect your trade, you need to have a strong navy to protect it. This strong navy then, how strong did it have to be? In case the next two strongest navies became allies of each other and together fought against you, you would still have the stronger navy. That was the idea behind it. Which meant that if one of these two or both of these two started strengthening their navy, Britain was obliged to strengthen its navy as well. Legally obliged. They had to do it. Okay? So if Germany increased the tonnage of its vessels, which it did because it wanted overseas colonies as well, Britain had to enter that arms race and to build an even stronger navy. And this kept on happening until everybody had collected enough ammunition to destroy each other. And that is what they decided to do. That is basically what happened. That is basically the origin of the First World War. Now we have all heard of stories of that Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the Austrian crown prince. Archduke manje crown prince, Yuvraj. Okay? So this and his wife were assassinated on a trip to Sarajevo. Sarajevo is in Bosnia, okay, which was a part of the Austrian Empire at that time. And there was a terrorist organization / freedom fighters set who decided to assassinate him. They succeeded. There was one part of the nation that later on became Yugoslavia that was helping these Bosnians to fight in their independence against the Austrians. This nation was Serbia. Serbia is a nation which exists today as well. The city of Belgrade is its capital. The Austrians demanded of the Serbians that their troops should be allowed to enter Serbia and carry out investigation of this assassination. Okay? You with me? It's a bit complicated. There's three entities here. Bosnia, which is a part of Austria, is fighting for independence. Serbia is helping Bosnia gain independence from Austria. Okay? And so when the Austrian prince is assassinated in Bosnia, they claim that the Serbians are behind this, and so they gave an ultimatum to Serbia. Follow all the things that we are demanding of you, or we will invade you. Okay? The Serbians belong to a race of people known as Slavs. Have you heard of this?
You have heard of the word Yugoslavia. Yeah, that word Slav does not mean slave. Okay, in their language,
Slav means glorious. Okay, that is the closest that I can think of. So it is a different race. Okay, the other Europeans, the Western Europeans, belong to a race which is known as Caucasian. All right, and these people were Slavic people. The largest Slavic nation is Russia, and Russia stood beside its Slavic cousin Serbia, saying that if Austria invades you, we will come to your aid. Okay. By now, Russia had also become an ally of France because they had a common enemy, Germany. Okay, and Germany, just like Austria, is a German-speaking country. Austria and Germany, they both have the common language, German. Okay, so just like Russia and Serbia are Slavs, Germany and Austria are Germans. Okay, so this is a complicated set of alliances. Serbia supported by Russia, whose ally is France because their enemy is Germany, whose ally is Austria, who is invading Serbia. Fine? It's just two sets of people, but this is the complicated Dravidi Pranayam way of aligning yourself against somebody. Okay? So France and Russia and Serbia on one side, Germany and Austria on the other side. Then the others were dragged into this conflict as well. Because the French had already lost in that 1871 war against the Germans, they had fortified their border. Okay, do you have your atlas with you? You can take a look at the region that I'm talking about. France and Germany have a common border, but they also have in a different place Belgium between them. Okay. So there's France, Belgium, and then Germany. And there's France and Germany. So there's one border in this manner. That Franco-German border was fortified by the French. Lots of fortifications, kille, and walls, and all of those things were built. So that the Germans can't invade from there. So what did the Germans do? They invaded Belgium first. Okay? They invaded Belgium and then entered France from there. Belgium was a recognized neutral nation. It gained its independence in 1848, and one of the terms of its independence was that all other European nations accept its neutrality. This treaty was backed by Britain, which meant that if anybody violated the neutrality of Belgium, Britain would come to its aid. Why? What's so special about Belgium? Belgium is the closest country on the European continent to Britain. Okay, the English Channel is at its narrowest between Britain and Belgium. Okay, so if you want to invade Britain, if you want to defeat that shark, Belgium is the best place to start your invasion from. All right. So if Belgium remains in neutral hands, Britain is safe. If Belgium is in the hands of an ambitious power like Germany, then Britain is threatened. Okay, so if anybody invades Belgium, Britain would come to its aid. So Britain got dragged into this as well. Italy and Germany were allies, but Italy decided to wait and watch. And later on joined the opponents of Germany. Okay? Just like Germany, this newly created nation of Italy also wanted colonies. So they waited and saw who would win, so that where will I get colonies? Same was the story with a country on the other side of the world, Japan. Japan had also managed to industrialize late in the 19th century. And that is another wonderful story, but unfortunately we are running out of time. The Japanese industrialization was so brisk, so immediate, literally revolutionary, that they had succeeded in defeating Russia in a war in the year 1904-1905. It turned out to be a very inspirational conflict for all of us. It's the first time that an Asian country had defeated the Europeans. Okay? Japan had defeated Russia in the field of war because they had managed to industrialize. In fact, Russia remained a very backward country. Compared to that, Japan had gone forward. industrialization was the key to that. They decided to copy everything that Britain and France and Germany had done. But they did that remaining an empire. They did not become a liberal democracy or anything until after the Second World War. So Japan also entered this war for colonies a bit late. They saw who is going to win and then fought on that side. Another country entered very late into the war, which was the so far isolated on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, United States of America. Okay, America was dragged into the war because of Germans following the same tactics that Napoleon had done against Britain. Blockade Britain. Don't allow any goods to reach Britain. So any ship that was steaming towards Britain was sunk by the Germans. This included passenger ships, which included American passengers. And that is what dragged America into the war as well. But very late. The First World War broke out in August 1914. United States entered in 1917. Russia exited in 1917. The Russians bore the brunt of the German and Austrian assault. They were the least industrialized of these European belligerents, and they were suffering so much in that war. They were so bad at organizing themselves and sending their troops because of the monarchical structure that they had. They still were ruled by that Tsar, right? Tsar or Czar or whatever you want to spell it as. Okay? This is why Russia underwent a revolution. Its people rose under the leadership of the Communist Party led by Lenin. And they overthrew their emperor and decided to end the war. They decided to sue for peace. They gave a significant part of their territory to Germany. घेऊन टाका आणि आम्हाला सोडून द्या. Okay? So half of Ukraine became part of Germany at that time in 1917, and Russia exited, which meant that Germany could concentrate only on the Western Front. But just as Russia exited, United States entered. Okay? And United States was even more industrialized, definitely more industrialized than Russia was, and that turned the tide in favor of the Allies against these Central Powers. And Germany and Austria and its later ally, the Turkish Empire, were all defeated. Once they were defeated, they were forced to pay damages for all the havoc that they had caused. Now the numbers are staggering. Some 23 million soldiers died during the First World War. Civilians died even more. Okay, even more civilian deaths were reported. Just as the war was ending, there was an epidemic of influenza, which is known as Spanish influenza. Okay, that killed even more people than the actual fighting had killed. Okay, this influenza epidemic actually originated in India, but it is not known as the Indian influenza. It is known as the Spanish influenza because 40% of Spain's population was wiped out. Okay, that is huge. So all of this hardship, the country that was held responsible for it was Germany. And you can't really blame the Allies for doing that. It was the Germans who had kind of cajoled the Austrians, go and invade Serbia. Aage badho, hum tumhare saath hai, vagare, vagare. Okay? If they did not have German support, the Austrians would not have started the war. If the Austrians had not invaded Serbia, Russia would not have entered. If Russia would not have entered, France would not have entered. If France would not have entered, Germany would not have invaded Belgium, and Britain would not have entered, and so on and so forth. Okay? So the root cause is Germany. That is what was decided by the victors. And at that very notorious Versailles Treaty, yeah, Versailles, Versailles is the pronunciation. The Germans were forced to accept responsibility for that great war and were forced to pay for the next several years damages, reparations for all the destruction that they had caused. Because they had just been defeated, they signed that treaty, but the people in Germany were not at all happy with that outcome. And one of them, who was not actually a German, he was born in Austria and he wanted to be an artist, but he was so terrible at it that he didn't get any admission in any college, and he remained resentful for the rest of his life, and his resentment was channeled into pretty much the destruction of the world. His name is Adolf Hitler, my third best friend, right? He ended up causing more damage than the First World War. Adolf Hitler rose to power through the typical electoral means. It was a minority government outside support from a different party. Once he came to power, he successfully became the dictator of Germany. His own people set fire to the German parliament building, and he used that as an excuse that there is an emergency situation in our country. So he imposed an emergency. The exact same provision existed in our constitution. We had copied that German constitution. That exact same provision was used by Indira Gandhi for imposing emergency in our country in 1975. She didn't even have to set fire to parliament, etc. Okay, we made it even more easier for her. But anyway, using these kind of tactics, Adolf Hitler came to supreme power in Germany, and his entire energy was focused on revenge for the First World War. Okay, and he built an even stronger army. His nation became even more industrialized. Some of the roads that he built known as autobahns, there are these expressways in Germany where there is no speed limit. Really, there is no speed limit. Go as fast as you dare. Yeah? These were built by Adolf Hitler. That, of course, doesn't make him a great guy, isn't it? Once his army was strong enough, he once again invaded Belgium. That is always the first one to fall, right? Well, actually, he invaded Poland first because he had a treaty with the Soviet Union, but it gets more and more complicated, and we really are running out of time. I mean, I can speak for 10 hours more, but there should be somebody to listen as well, right? So, that is how the Second World War was launched. September 1939, 25 years after the launch of the First World War, Germany invaded Poland. Soviet Union invaded Poland from the other side. It had become Soviet Union after the 1917 revolution. And once again, everybody fell into place. He amchi side, thi tumchi side, he amchi party, vagare vagare. Okay. There were alliances. Poland's independence was guaranteed by France and Britain, so they entered the war against Germany. Germany invaded then Belgium and Netherlands and Denmark and Norway and France. All of them were defeated in no time. In the First World War, France and even Belgium held out for 4 entire years. No territory was ever captured. Okay. Over here, by June 1940, less than 10 months after the invasion had begun, France had been defeated. Okay. The situation now in Europe was very similar to what it was at the time of Napoleon. All of Europe was ruled by one person. The only thing that remained was Britain. Okay. Britain managed to hold out under the leadership of Winston Churchill. Meanwhile, Japan, which was not satisfied with what it had gained in the First World War, had invaded China, and then from there onwards it started invading all the British territories in Asia, starting with Hong Kong and Singapore, and then later on Vietnam and Philippines and all of these places. Everything was captured by the Japanese. Italy, which was also dissatisfied with what it had gained after the First World War, entered the Second World War on the side of the Germans. So this was a very, very strong alliance. The only way to defeat it was to somehow get Soviet Union or United States to start fighting on Britain's side. The Soviet Union started fighting on Britain's side because Hitler invaded Soviet Union, although it was his ally. So he made the same mistake that Napoleon did, invaded them in September. He should have done it in June, because it takes a long time to get to Moscow. By the time winter had set in, it was such a severe winter that diesel froze. Now you had tanks, etc., but they can't run if diesel has become solid. It was that cold. The soldiers literally had to light fires under their tanks in the morning so that dupar parayant suru hoil vagare. Okay, that literally had happened. They were stuck in those vast Soviet expanses, and that caused their downfall. United States entered the war, you know how. Pearl Harbor, Japan invaded Hawaii, and United States entered the war. Hitler made his second mistake over here. The first was invading Soviet, well, the first was getting born, but the first mistake was invading the Soviet Union. The second mistake was, as soon as Japan invaded Pearl Harbor, Hitler declared war on the United States. If he had not done that, these would have been two different wars, right? Japan versus United States on one side, and Germany versus Soviet Union and Britain on the other side. Okay? But Hitler declared war on the United States because it was an ally of Japan, as if that had ever mattered to Hitler. No alliances had ever mattered, but for some reason he thought that this is a good idea. Why? Because he believed that America is run by Jews. And he believed that it was the Jews who had signed that Treaty of Versailles. It was the Jews who had betrayed the German nation in the First World War. And it was the Jews who were his pet hate. For him, he built those concentration camps where he collected them like cattle and systematically eliminated them. 6 million, 60 lakh European Jews were killed indiscriminately just because they were Jews, no other reason. Okay? Why do Europeans hate Jewish people so much? Well, that is a very different story. Okay? The Jews were not allowed to hold any land or own any industry in many European nations. They were immigrants from elsewhere, from the country today known as Israel. Okay? And the only job they were allowed to do was money lending. Okay? And as you are aware, money lenders are hated wherever they are. That is the origin of that. Then there are theological reasons. It was the Jews who betrayed Jesus Christ to the Romans, and that is why Jesus Christ was crucified, etc., etc. But all of that really doesn't make much sense. Anyway, whatever pathological reason Adolf Hitler had, he wreaked his vengeance, and the entire world suffered for it. Finally, the Japanese, although they lost all the territory that they had conquered, they were on the footstep of India. Okay? One of the most famous battles fought by the British Army was at Kohima. Where is Kohima? Yes, Northeast India. Thank you very much. Yeah. Fine. You should know these things. Okay. Anyway, that is considered one of the 5 greatest battles fought by the British Army. That was, of course, the Royal Indian Army which had fought that battle against the Japanese. And they had stopped Japan over there. And later on, the Americans and the British and the Canadians and the Australians and the New Zealanders and the Indians gradually started winning back everything that Japan had won, until only Japan remained. And even then, they continued to fight. And it would have taken 3 or 4 years more of fighting to finally defeat the Japanese. So the Americans decided to use the nuclear weapon, right? And in August 1945, they dropped 2 bombs. It was not a big deal to wipe out an entire city. That is what these countries had been doing to each other for 6 years now. But one bomb destroying an entire city was unheard of. Okay? And that finally convinced the Japanese to surrender. But the Soviets, who had also suffered once again so much in this war, claimed that America could have ended the war much before it actually did. They claimed that the Europeans, Britain, France, and America deliberately allowed Hitler to last longer than was needed so that the Soviets would be weakened. Okay, this was the paranoia of my other great friend, Stalin. Okay, सगळे एअरपोर्ट आहेत, आता काय करायचं त्यांच्याबद्दल. Okay, if Hitler was paranoid, Stalin तर त्याचा बाप होता in these matters. Okay. And that is what launched what came to be known as the Cold War, right? And that is what we started, right? The Cold War finally ended after the Russians had been defeated in Afghanistan. I gave you the first rule of empire: do not invade Russia. The second is do not invade Afghanistan. Yeah. In Indian history, you know that the British tried to capture Afghanistan, make it a buffer between India and Russia, and were defeated 3 times. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan late in the 1980s, and the Cold War ended because of that. Okay. Now America has invaded Afghanistan, yeah,
it has been what 18 years and they are still stuck over there. Okay, don't invade Afghanistan. Fine, invite them to play cricket and defeat them there. त्याच्यात सुख मानून घ्या. Try to watch this movie. Another post Kumbh Mela no younger sibling wala movie.
Charlie Wilson's War. It is about the methods the Americans used to defeat the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. Charlie Wilson was a congressman, as in Lok Sabha MP of the United States. That role is played by Tom Hanks. Okay, but absolutely do not watch it with anybody below 18. I know some of you are below 18, so you have to wait your turn. Fine. I keep telling these things so that you remain interested in studying these matters. Okay, it is imperative that you understand these things. That is the only way I can be assured that my country is in good hands. Okay, so work hard, enjoy all of these things. History, as I said, it is as fun to remember as Game of Thrones. Okay, but it really happened, so there is a payoff as well. Okay, the most you can do by spouting Game of Thrones trivia is perhaps win some quiz contest. Okay, you gain a lot by knowing these things inside out. Okay, so I'll see you next year. I mean, not just calendar year, which reminds me, Happy New Year. Enjoy and all the very best. The students who have also enrolled for history optional, please meet me. The rest of you are free to leave. Enjoy. History optional ज्यांनी आता एनरोल केलेला आहे क्लासमध्ये, ओके, हिस्ट्री ऑप्शनलचा क्लास लावलेला आहे या वर्षी करंटली, त्यांनी प्लीज थांबावे. बाकीचे एन्जॉय. येस, देयर इज नो लेक्चर आफ्टर दिस.